Shall we start? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming here at the Barbican Library for the Symposium Fashion as Catalyst, Making and Advocating for Social Change, which is part of the public program of the Shifting Narratives exhibition, which I hope you had the chance to see, but there will be also more time to go and see it. The agenda for today is that I will deliver a quick introductory presentation to give you an update about the project, set the context, and also introduce some of the themes that have emerged from the project and which will then be unpacked in the two panel debates. We'll then leave the floor to Carole, who will chair the first panel on making and learning. We will have a quick break. You can go and get some refreshments, and then we will move into a spoken word performance by Toyin Gbomedo, Stitches of Injustice, which will then lead to the second panel chaired by Ciara on advocacy and policy. I will give some closing remarks, and there will be time for networking, enjoying some more drinks, and also watch the exhibition. Also, I'd like to remind you that besides us attending here in person, there is an audience also online from around the world on Zoom. So as well, bear with us if there are any technical issues, but we are in the good hands of Alex. And as well, I'd like to remind you that we are taking photos and filming this event because this room is quite small and we wanted to make it available to more people. So if you don't want to appear in the photos or if you don't want to be in the film, let us know and we will let it down before we share with others. So before we start, I'd like also to introduce myself. I should have done before. My name is Francesco Mazzarella. I am reader in Design for Social Change at London College of Fashion. I'm a design activist, researcher, and educator with lived experience of migration. And in this picture, you can see myself holding my textile autobiography that looks like a patchwork of the different cultures which I've absorbed in the 6 countries where I've lived in my migration journey in search of better education and employment opportunities. I acknowledge that I didn't have to flee from war or persecution, and I acknowledge also that I've built now a position of power and privilege at LCF, but I use it to enable opportunities for others to craft their own life journeys. When we set up this project, we had in mind the challenging context of the refugee crisis and the mass displacement of people, but also the hostile environment that the UK government has created for asylum seekers and refugees. In this project, we also want to challenge the cultural appropriation practices that are often undertaken by fashion brands who do not get consent, do not give credit or compensation to the cultural minorities from which this textile heritage originates. We also advocate in this project for considering culture as an essential component of a sustainability agenda beyond the 3 most recognized pillars of sustainability: the economy, the environment, and society. And we also want to move beyond designers who are often parachuted into marginalized communities with the assumption that we can bring our knowledge and expertise to solve other people's problems. Just an overview about this project. We received funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council. We started this project in September 2022, and it's about to end next month in August. I was the principal investigator on this project, and I was very grateful to work with an amazing team. We had Professor Lucy Horta as a co-investigator, Dr. Seher Mirza as a postdoctoral research fellow, Nicole Zisma as a project administrator, and also lots of different practitioners and freelancers in different roles. Camilla Palestra as a curatorial associate, Alisa Ruzavina, workshop facilitator, JC Candanedo, visual artist, Toyin Gbomedo, PhD researcher, and many others. And as well, we had huge partnerships with the Victoria and Albert Museum, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, 3 local authorities, Waltham Forest, Tower Hamlets, and Newham, and also 3 community arts centers: Rosetta Arts, Bo Arts, Arbeit Project, and also Popular Harka, which is a housing association. I'd like to show you a short film that was produced by David Betteridge for the second part of this project.
This project have made us understand that fashion is your culture. Fashion is like what is being sustainable for so many years.
The project works with refugees and asylum seekers in East London to create fashion garments or fashion accessories, and also the advocacy for policy. It was a series of co-creation workshops. The pieces that they were making represented different parts of their journeys of being in the UK since coming from their home countries. So there's this wonderful mixing of cultures, and what we found was a lot of participants were taking elements of their own culture and also things that they wanted to adopt from the UK. So really it was this regeneration of cultures or this rethinking of cultures. And cultural sustainability, in a sense, is this growing or living definition for us. We also had a student project with MA students from London College of Fashion. We had refugee or asylum-seeking participants within the project groups with the students. One of the student groups produced a beautiful film which narrated the story of one of the participants. Another student's project was putting different recipes from different cultures together.
Food somehow is sort of like a global language. We decided to create a workshop where we could get people to talk about food and how it sparks a memory and how they're still carrying those pieces of their culture and maybe passing it on to their future generations here. The results were amazing. We put all of those recipes together into an artifact which is inspired by the culture of a giant tablecloth that people can eat around.
There was a fashion show at LCF, which was lovely to see, all the participants proudly wearing the pieces that they had created. We also did 3 roundtable discussions, which were part of the advocacy package of the research project. And they were held with different stakeholders from academia, a local government, fashion industry, and of course, the most important people were the refugees and asylum seekers who were part of this conversation. It's about bringing everyone together on the table to discuss what are the ways forward for creating these avenues of work for refugees and asylum seekers.
So at the moment in the UK, asylum seekers for the most part are barred from seeking paid work, but also there's a big challenge for those who have just got their refugee status but really unable to find housing, and that's mostly because they're not able to find well-paid work. And that's in contrast to, we know in the fashion industry, there's like big skill shortages. The real question for us is, well, where is the big strategic opportunity for us to think about how we can bridge these gaps?
So one participant in particular, we could see her journey, how she developed her work. She also worked with us as a facilitator in some of the workshops that we ran with Rosetta Arts.
The main thing I've learned is that it's not just talk. It's also you have to do something afterwards, like you have to take some action plans and so that was good to know that after all the workshops there will be an outcome and then they're going to take some actions and it will be more legally, bring changes. So that was something great to know.
So how that then goes forward through those networks, how it develops through those networks, how the policy develops. So really those are the legacies of this project. So the most valuable thing that I would take away from this project is really the sense of community that was brought together. All these different people from very different backgrounds.
You have different ideas. You can learn from other people. So it's something that I really enjoy it here in the project because I was able to know other people.
Actually, it opened a wide door, I would say, a wide perspective to my art as a career.
These projects have actually given you skills as well as platform to actually display your skills, sell your skills, and progress. So this is amazing. The whole journey was actually completely unbelievable for me.
This it's really a lesson for all of us, really, of how you can really draw so much strength from community, from others, and really just sort of reminds us what it is to be human.
We have produced different outputs for different audiences, mostly for the general public, like textile autobiographies, textile maps, banners, artifacts, performances, short films, the one you saw and another one, exhibitions, performances, and most of them are exhibited here, but also some academic publications like a conference paper. Me and Seher also guest edited a special issue of the Discern Journal. We brought a project report and also 2 symposia, of which one is now happening now. Then we also had 2 student project briefs and 1 master's dissertations in applied psychology in fashion. And finally, we also brought a policy paper for policymakers. Throughout the project, we've engaged with over 40 participants from 19 different countries: India, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, China, the States, and so on. And the project really, the participants really value the opportunity to learn or improve their technical and soft skills, enhance their confidence, amplify their voice and agency, but also make very meaningful connections within the local community. We are always interested in this project in decentering these practices and also shifting the roles and challenging the dynamics within these collaborative making spaces. So for instance, we hired some of the participants to deliver workshops to other members of the community and be paid for this. So we enable some progression pathways. For instance, we also donated a camera to a refugee participant who now is rebuilding his photography career here in the UK and is also working for us with us on the project. One of the participants was hired as community co-curator at LCF for an exhibition. Some participants then have progressed into technical fashion design courses. We're also excited to share with you the news that we are finalists for the Green Gown Awards competition, and in November we'll know if we win. Keep all your fingers crossed for us. We also mentored 1 young East Londoner, and we offered work experience to another young person. We collaborated with Malé Luján Escalante on another HRC-funded Refugee Network Transition Network grant. And also Nicole Zisman got an Arts Council England grant through which she offered work experience to some of the participants as well in her fashion brands. Throughout the making, we've been listening to the challenges and also needs and aspirations of refugees and asylum seekers here, especially, and also the interconnected issues within this system. So housing and violence within the contingency hotels where asylum seekers are staying, the issue of food quality in the hotels, financial struggles, mental health and isolation, as well the need to get legal support and advice to get the refugee status and the right to work, but also the issue of recognizing degrees here in the UK and access education, as well as getting jobs. We've also mapped out the different stakeholders and organizations that refugees and asylum seekers interact with here in the UK. So like the local councils that provide housing as well as financial support, the Home Office that provide the refugee status and the right to work, and other charities that focus on food or mental health, or other organizations that provide business support or support to become entrepreneurs. But actually as well, this map shows that there is a lack, as based on our research, there is a lack of or a shortage of safe spaces and spaces of social belonging. And this project is starting to contribute to that. In the advocacy work package, we worked with different stakeholders from across the fashion and creative industries, charities working with refugees, as well as policymakers. And in the policy paper, we are advocating for enabling access to good work for refugees in the fashion industry. And this would benefit not only skilled refugees, but also tackle the skills shortage that we have in the fashion industry here in the UK. And in the policy paper, Threads of Opportunity, we have outlined several policy asks. For instance, for the central government, we are asking to grant asylum seekers the right to work within 6 months. but also to add relevant fashion and textiles job to the UK immigration salary list that includes jobs of which there is a shortage here in the resident labour market. As well, we are asking local councils to support safe, inclusive and welcoming spaces for refugees and asylum seekers to engage with fashion, textiles and other creative practices as a form of social prescribing to enhance their well-being. We're also asking to support and deliver a skills training while you wait program for asylum seekers and recent refugees. And finally, we're also asking the fashion businesses to develop traineeship and apprenticeship for refugees paid at a real living wage. And if you scan this QR code, you can sign the petition to urge policymakers to support our policy asks, so that you can join our call to action and support a more equitable and just future. These are some of the themes that have emerged from the research and that can be unpacked and discussed more in the 2 panels. In this project, we are reframing what fashion means in the context of design for cultural sustainability with refugee communities. Here, we're not interested, well, we don't consider fashion from the Western lens of the commercial fashion system, but we are much more interested in the social and cultural practices of multi-ethnic communities. They engage in these participatory practices in order. Fashion can be used as a storytelling tool, as a vehicle for social change, but also an opportunity to support the process of becoming and to shift to are rebuilding their lives in a new place, but also challenging of oppression and exploitation. In this project, we consider culture as a multi-layer and ever-evolving reality. We don't consider culture as a return to our fixed roots, but rather as roots through which we travel, integrate, learn and integrate, and also create meaning. Engaging with fashion and textiles can foster a sense of belonging, especially for refugees who feel displaced and live transient lives. But on the other hand, some of the refugees participants also told us that they have very traumatic memories of their home countries, and they almost want to reject some of their cultural heritage, and they want to embrace other elements of different cultures as a way to integrate into a new place, and so redesign their own cultures. As well, in this project, the creative making space has offered an opportunity to rebuild shattered levels of self-confidence, but also to relocate oneself within a very different social structure. And also, we want to shift the narratives that is often focused on what refugees lack to rather highlight how much they can bring to the host communities in terms of invaluable craft skills, community resilience, and also material culture and values. This project the participants really valued this project as a safe space where they can engage with fashion and textiles to express their shifting identities. We want to counter and challenge the hostile environment created by the UK government, and rather we are creating safe and welcoming and inclusive spaces and spaces of social belonging for refugees. As I showed in the other map, most of these organizations have administrative or legal functions, but participants don't really feel a sense of belonging to these organizations, and it may also be rejected from the diaspora communities they identify with. And this contributes to further isolations, confidence loss, and also mental health issues. Working in this context also highlight the needs to have to develop and adopt a framework of ethics of care, having safeguarding measures in place at all times, as well as support systems, collaborate with trauma-informed professionals that are very important when we bring to facilitate dialogue when bringing together different people from different cultures, so that we can foster mutual understanding beyond cultural differences. As well as we are grappling with the term decolonizing in this project, for us it means unlearning inherent knowledge, but also being very open to learn new viewpoints. And as well as design educators and also reflexive practitioners, we have a whole experience a transformative journey that through critical reflection and self-consciousness. And as well, working in this context is very important for design researchers like us to constantly reflect and challenge reflect on our positionality, challenge our own privilege, and also shift the power dynamics at play in those collaborative making processes. As members of the team, we didn't want to do a study about refugees because we are very mindful of the fact that they are amongst the most interviewed and monitored populations. And also we didn't want to assume a helper attitude, but we rather all engage in a reciprocal process of making and learning to build empathy and reciprocity within this. And finally, as well, in this project, we have reframed what community resilience means through the lived experience of refugees. So we define community resilience as the collective agency against oppression and exploitation, but also the ability to challenge existing power structures and activate social change through community efforts, as well as leveraging the diversity within the community. We also challenge the notion of resilience, of community itself, because as well, refugees are not a homogeneous community. They all have very different cultural backgrounds and very different stories and journeys, and they flee here for very different reasons. We also challenge the notion of resilience. In fact, as you can read from this quote, resilience is a positive quality to have, but it shouldn't be used by other organizations like local authorities to deflect their own responsibilities. And I think I'm done with this. I'm sure I spoke for way longer than I wanted to, but I will leave the floor to Carole Morrison, who will chair the first panel on making and learning. And we can invite the panelists to come and sit at the table. Maybe we will just introduce Carole. Carole is head of social purpose in the curriculum at London College of Fashion, UAL, where she co-creates interventions with staff, students, and neighborhood representatives to explore, promote, and embed issues of citizenship, social conscience, and ethics in the curriculum. Prior to working at UAL, she held senior roles in regeneration, arts and culture, and has worked both nationally and internationally, including the Arts Council England, Take Britain, and Centro Cultural Sao Paulo in Brazil. Her current area of research explores anti-colonial thinking and practice, and she's a recipient of the Advanced HE Collaborative Award for Teaching Excellence, and she's also an associate member of Centre for Sustainable Fashion. Over to you, Carole.
Thanks so much, Francesco, for that. That's a really brilliant introduction to the project and a reminder of the project for people who've been here before. I just want to welcome panel members to the panel, as it were. So is there four? Ah, Zeej, you're here. Brilliant, brilliant. So, yeah, welcome. Take a seat. I've got the immense pleasure of facilitating this panel. And before I get started, I'd love to just tell you a quick bit about this session. It's just about an hour. We'll spend half of it having a discussion about the project and the other half, hopefully, including some of your ideas, thoughts and questions that you might have. So can you make a mental note of that and definitely have questions for us, please. And after that, we'll have a quick tea break, as you said, and have wonderful performance poetry from Toyin. So I'm going to actually read you the biogs of our panelists here. It feels slightly uncomfortable when you do that, having people read about you. Yeah. Awesome. Pin me to the corner. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to start with Alisa. Is that right? Alisa, you made it here. Great, thank you. So Alisa Ruzavina. Yeah. Alisa Ruzavina is a community and ecology tending interdisciplinary artist, primarily working with textiles, installation, and public art. Her socially engaged practice is focused on creating with diverse participants through co-design, participation, and collaboration, making spaces for conversations and collective experiences that playfully explore alternative forms of knowledge, opening possibilities for ways of making, coexisting, and being that brings us closer in relationship with the intercultural and interspecies communities surrounding us. Rooted in her own experience as a migrant, she is passionate about creating exchanges across bodies, species, lived experiences, and differences that nurture a sense of belonging and support the articulation of a communal identity. I'm going to read, yes, this is Alisa. So Tabitha, I'll do next. So Tabitha Ross here is co-founder and director of operations at Makini. Have I pronounced that right? Makini, a charity that works with women seeking sanctuary in Lebanon and the UK through the arts. Makini's project Oshana, Have I pronounced that right? Okay. Provides Syrian and Palestinian women with a dignified income, a supportive community, and a creative outlet for trauma through crochet and traditional embroidery, which is sold online and in the UK. This also helps to protect cultural heritage. It's Tabitha, thank you. And next to me here, I have Dr. Malé Luján Escalante, who, did I get that right? Yeah. I did, great, thank you. Malé is a senior lecturer in the design school at London College of Communication, teaching on the MA Service Design and Design School research methods. Malé delivers design-led research for social value with students and partners via knowledge exchange projects. Malé's research focuses on responsible innovation, ethical implications of socio-technological services, pluriversal futures, and other ways of knowing. She is the principal investigator of the AHRC-funded Refugee Transition Network, working with urban refugees in London and Indonesia to support participatory governance, frameworks for responsible innovation, and crisis resilience. That's Malé. We've got a brilliant panel, haven't we? But last but not least, we also have Zeej Alhajji. Yeah? Originally from Saudi Arabia, Zeej has a multifaceted background that combines a passion for health, entrepreneurship, and the arts. With a formal education in dental hygiene and a diploma in business management, Zeej has a well-rounded perspective on both health and business. He is also a dedicated artist, often drawing inspiration from his experiences and surroundings. Zeej particularly enjoys drawing what's inside his mind, using art as an outlet when he is overwhelmed or stressed. His abstract artwork, which I'm sure you've all seen at the beginning of the entrance here, his abstract artwork reflects his unique perspective on the world, offering a glimpse into how he sees things differently. Currently, Zeej is studying adult social care, driven by a commitment to supporting and improving the lives of others, and continually seeking new ways to innovate and inspire. So this is our panel. So in the short time we have available, I have 4, possibly 5 questions for you. Yeah, don't be scared. Don't be scared. You've all seen these questions as well, I know. So starting with Alisa, I think, we've had a chance to look at some of your work in the textiles and autobiography section. And particularly there's a globe with dots around it, and you talk about it in terms of nature embracing you. So the question we have here for you is, I wonder if you could just very briefly share your experience of what Francesco described as reciprocal making and learning, in particular through fashion and textiles, and possibly what does fashion mean to you in the context of your sort of creative practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe let me start from the end and say that to me, I studied fashion design at Centre St. Martin's and UAL, and really found that making outcomes for sale was just not nourishing my soul and my community around me. And one of the most transformative experiences I've had is living for a year with a Guna community in Panama, who are an indigenous community. I got a grant to work with them. And really spending a year with, and it's still intact, village community where everything is taken care of by the community has really opened my eyes. Oh, thank you so much. It really has opened my eyes to a more holistic community way of living and working and being together. And so upon my return, and of course working half across the world, really feeling the colonial narratives of being there on a British Council fund, really learning a lot, but really wanting to bring that back to the place where I am. Mm-hmm. I'm a migrant, and hence for me it was really very much about trying to find ways to co-create with communities around me. And so I moved from a much more global practice, working with different artisan communities in India as well, to very much a hyper-local practice. So I work mostly in East London, so Waltham Forest, Newham, Hackney, and very much with diverse charities, museums, working on participatory projects where I am the support role to create community outputs, or sometimes I'm in a more of a leadership role, but the outputs are not dictated by me, but are driven by collective input. To me, that feels like a very important role to hold as an artist at the moment, to really shift those hierarchies of power, and also whose voices get heard. And I have a great privilege to be educated, to have a small profile that can support other voices. And so for me, fashion really is a form of healing. It's where stories are embodied. They are embodied stories that are worn and that are made by hands. So something that is untangible, knowledge, or sometimes culture can feel very abstract, can be really much grounded into clothing. For me, that's a beautiful, it's not a product. It's a storytelling tool, very similar to what Francesco said. And it's a way to explore really complex topics through hand movement and through putting it on yourself. It's a great tool of empowerment. I love dressing up because it's such an empowering feeling. And it's also a way to exchange with other people. It's like wearing your heart on your sleeve, wearing your culture on your sleeve, wearing your story. I can tell you about so much of my life just by what I wear or what I make. So for me, it's a really deep tool, and it's much more than just product and decoration.
Well, thank you, Alisa. I think it's really interesting how we're exploring this theme of fashion as catalyst, not only moving from global to local, but looking at haptic skills, telling stories, etc. So thank you for your response. Can everybody hear properly at the moment? Yeah, great. No?
Also, there are a few chairs here at the front.
We'll try and project as well. Yeah, so thank you very much for that, Alisa. I'm going to ask Zeej about your experience as well. And again, I was struck by your jacket. It features in many of the pictures that we've seen here, and it's at the front as well. And this theme of fashion as catalyst and telling of stories, as it were. I wondered if you could sort of share your experience on this project and your kind of engagement in this sort of dynamic sharing. And based on your experience of the project, also tell us a bit about what fashion means to you.
Yeah, sure. First, when I joined the project, my primary motivation was to get involved with the community since I was asylum seeker, and asylum can take ages. So it was a suggestion by one of my friends in the hostel. He told me, if you are interested in joining this project, it's about fashion. I said, okay, why not? Let's try something new. So fashion had never been a significant part in my life before, but I'm always curious. So out of curiosity, I thought maybe this opportunity will resonate my passion for art. Let's see where or how it will develop. But then when I joined the project, I get to know new people, and I discover some new skills that I have it since I paint, I draw. So
You're a dentist.
After a couple of months, the meaning or the definition of fashion has changed. It's before, clothing never been like, has no meaning for me. But after a while, fashion represent identity, culture, and what you stand for, what you believe. So now I have a special place in my heart for fashion. And this is life, full of surprises.
That's
Can we see? Yeah, can we see the image of her, of the jacket? And can you tell us the story of the jacket? I think that was the question I had. Was this? Yeah.
Sure.
Can you tell us the story?
So when to be honest, I was confused what to make as a design, and Alisa, she was really good facilitator. She when someone told me that, when someone is telling me you have to make something from your background or your country, my mind went blank because I don't know what to do. Like Saudi Arabia, basically a desert and few, and I'm not very connected to the heritage. So then I thought maybe I share my own story since I came to the UK. There's up and down, loneliness, uncertainty of what's my future will be. Am I going to be accepted by the immigration or not? So I draw. If you can see here, it's the Prophet's Muhammad mosque, which is in Medina, which I'm very related to. It represents my identity as a Muslim, and then beside that, I draw like European style houses, and if you can notice, these plants coming from both buildings, and are green in color, and what I want to deliver from this drawing, that I still connected to my my identity as a Saudi person who come from a Muslim country, but I'm planning my roots in this country now, and the yellowish and orange leaves, because it reminds me of my start, of my beginning here. I came in autumn 2022, so my eyes were kind of observing these two colors and kind of stay in my mind. The drawing, the face, I always draw my mood, my up and down, myself in this way, and you can see this face has no expression, like he's not happy, he's not sad. I was in the middle of this stage because I was uncertain what's gonna be tomorrow. I attached the flag of my country on my sleeve, and the other one I attached in the front. I also did embroidery with this face. This is my way to draw. So I thought I can use my skills in drawing, in embroidery, and I'm satisfied. I'm now very happy that I learned this because I joined the workshops and this project. Thank you for lovely people.
Thank you, Zeej. So, fashion is catalyst. Thank you, Zeej, for that. I think, I think maybe people will have questions for you after, so I'm not going to ask my question now because I've got to stay on script. So I'm going to stay on script. So the next question that I have is for Tabitha, actually, and it's related to making and learning as well. And you work with Makini, the company or the organisation that works with women from Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine. That's right, isn't it? Seeking and creating sanctuary, I think it says on your website. I wanted you to ask this question about your approach to this kind of reciprocal nature of making and learning with relation to fashion, and possibly any other creative practices that might be relevant here.
Thank you so much. So Makini means my place in Arabic, as these will tell us, confirm. And that's the name of our charity because it was co-founded with my really dear friend and colleague, Aitab, who is from Syria. And she came up with the name, and she said, all my life I've been searching for a place where I can feel safe and free and able to express myself as a woman, but also as a refugee, having been unable to go back to Syria, I'm looking for a place to belong. And so that has sort of been my colleague's lifelong search, really. And she can't be here, so I'm representing her in this moment. But she and I together wanted to create safe spaces for women, and particularly women who've been forced to leave their homes. So it's our work as a charity is about challenging that double marginalisation. We work through the arts. So we have three main areas that we work in. One is fashion and textiles, one is theatre, and one is filmmaking. And we work in Lebanon with Syrian and Palestinian refugee women. And we've worked there for a very long time, since the first year of the Syrian uprising. And we have also just since last year started working here in London. So the fashion and textiles was our first ever project. It's our social enterprise, maybe we call it, Oshana, where Syrian and Palestinian women do incredible embroidery, much of which they do and they create, and it's their patterns based on this amazing cultural heritage. They also do crochet, which is wonderful because it's quite easy. You can sit together, you can do it as a very communal activity. And we sell what they make here in the UK, and they get 100% of the profits. So all of the money goes to them. But they all say, I started working with Oshana for the income, but I stayed because it's become my family. And I don't know if they'd call it mental health benefits, but they say it calms my anxiety, or if I wake up in the night and I'm panicking, I will get out my embroidery and do that because it's very calming and meditative. And we've just started a sort of embroidery project here in London, which is quite different. We're collaborating with a really amazing academic and activist from the University of Brighton, who has a project called Domestic Dusters, where she takes yellow dusters and works with groups of women to embroider their stories or their messages or anything they want on them. And it's about domesticity and feminism and anything you want it to be, really. So a quite different sort of textile project there. In terms of theatre, we've done two sort of theatre projects where we've put on a play. We worked with Syrian and Palestinian women in Lebanon to create their own version of Antigone. And then just like 10 days ago, we worked with a group of women, some of whom are also involved in Francesco's project.
And in my project.
And in your project, yes. To put on a new play bouncing off a Greek comedy called Lysistrata, which is about women going on sex strike to stop a war. And they were brilliant, and that went on at the Park Theatre in Finsbury Park in London. So, and we also have a project in Lebanon which is pure theatre therapy. So it's not about a product or a performance. It's just about coming together and using theatre for expression and healing. And our third area is filmmaking, where again we teach women how to make films, everything from editing to storyboarding to shooting. And then they make their own short films, and we're in the middle of doing that for the first time in London, having done it in Lebanon. And again, it's about creating a platform, self-expression, and safe spaces and coming together. So that's what we do, and I will stop because I know there's lots to get through.
No, it's really good to hear you talk about Makini as one of those policy things that Francesco pointed out, creating one of those safe spaces for belonging, you know, at a time when we can see public spaces disappearing all the time. It's just really refreshing. I do have a question for you, though. So really love some of this stuff. Where can we buy it if we wanted to buy?
Yes, please do
Is
buy
it.
it.
Go on to the website.
It's online. Oshana is oshana.co.uk, and it's OSHANA. There you are.
Yeah, thank you. It's beautiful, and the stories that come from that will be really enriching for everyone here. So I have a question for you, Malé, actually. Having worked with some of the participants that Tabitha has as well, you also work at UAL, don't you, at LCC, teaching about design. What's your experience on this question of reciprocal teaching and learning, particularly from a point of view sort of knowledge exchange and the teaching practice that you embody, as it were.
Hi, I have to say that the play was sold out. It was full 4 days, and the place was brilliant. So I'm happy to get to know you or be near to you. I'm also happy to be among such an amazing panel. We have almost the 5 continents here. So thank you. My background is working in the context of disaster and emergency responses with services. I have a series of years working in Southeast Asia, and I start working with communities that for these services are in risk or that are vulnerable according with the services, always challenging the idea of crisis or the idea of vulnerable as capitalist constructions, and instead thinking about opportunities to flourish in a different way. So when we start working with refugees, work both in Indonesia and England, we thought how difficult it was to talk about it or to write about it or to speak about it when we were challenged the idea of refugee, the word refugee, or the word host community, or the word welcome community, or absolutely almost our project was called for care for futures for all. And even the idea of future, we were challenging with future better for who or how, and what about if we have other ideas? And the project born because we wanted to test a framework that is called transition design. That is a way of using design for transitions into a different system. And we thought displaced people will have a very good experience in transiting into different systems. They have a lived experience, and either instead of engaging them as a victim or because of the label of asylum seeking or the status label, engaging them as experts and learn from them. So how do we do that? I was struck at the beginning. We were having a lot of conversations, and we were having conversations with people that were with the status of refugees, and they say, and what about if people don't want to transit? You're talking about moving to another post-capitalist sense, but what about if we don't want? And that question stayed with us, and we arrived to the conclusion that for wanting a transition is beyond academic work and it's beyond design work. It entails spiritual and political work. So, in spiritual, in the sense of energy exchange, no religion, and political in a sense that is necessarily to make the work of see and communicate power, these dynamics, unfair power dynamics. And that question bounces back to us as a designers, as a teachers, because in academia, do we have a colonizing system? A global colonizing system of knowledge, if you want. And as designers, we have a role in capitalism, a historical work in colonialism that we cannot be denied. So the project was to learn, not to teach, not to engage, but was to learn. What can we learn? And I involved my students for first time in a way of teaching. That was the first time that I do it, where we exercise spirituality and political action in the classroom. And it was a total risk. I saw people would leave me alone with this, or wasn't incomprehensible. It was a success. We have 10 projects that invite displaced people, particularly from LGBTQ backgrounds, to think how they can share the expertise as change makers, and empower them and inspiring them for that. Some of the images that you see are our students' projects with this community. Some of them are here. So if you want, the experts are sitting amongst you. To celebrate the end of the project, we have a sharing circle about a month ago. And the interesting thing is that in the sharing circle, we have displaced people but also we have academics from UL and students and alumni and PhD people. And the feedback that I got back from the displaced youth people that were amongst us, it was, I was never been in an event not introduced as refugee. I was never been in an event where I was sitting arm to arm with professors and PhD students. I was never feel so safe that I needed not to tell my story or where I come from or what was my suffering, but I was telling what I was thinking and what I was experiencing. And thank you for that space. So I don't know if I respond any
You
of
have, but I've got you. You have, and there's a lot there. I think what I think I'm wanting to explore a bit more is this transition that you talk about, and the space that you created. The sort of, you talked about creating a safe space. You talked about using spirituality and politics. How do you do those two things together and create a safe space? So I suppose a question for me really here is, what do you put in place to enable the things like the sharing circle that you talked about? What do you put in place to create inclusive, safe, brave, creative spaces for the kind of participation that you do, when you also have displaced people, people with PhDs, academics, all in the same space? What are the things that you think are important?
I would reframe your question, if I'm allowed. It was not what I put in place. It was what I took out.
Okay.
I had to take out all my ego, all my expertise, all my, I don't know, so many years working in this area. My doctorate in blah, blah, blah. I have to take all of that out.
I want one of those, a doctorate in blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I think I had to take all of that out.
Yeah.
And relearn and go with the honest thing about relearn. I'm in search of tools to exercise political activation and spiritual connection, but I'm not an expert in any of those. We were using some breathing exercises, some the use of sharing circle, nonviolent communications tools. We were using to talk in a more holistic way, not just about the project that we were doing, but what this means in your life. What are you learning? You know, we were talking about the class become a little bit, well, I have to talk to my line manager to see if I can get yoga mats, that sort of thing, no? And then see and reflect on the constraints of academia for that, because the students needed to be marked at the end. The projects need outcomes and impacts, and you know, it is a series of constraints when you're trying to kind of work within. I don't know how was the success of that, but I'm not going back. This is gonna be my way of teaching. I don't know. The students are there.
I was going to say, can we have some questions from the students at the end on this, actually? So can you get your questions ready to explore that a bit more? But still on this question of safe spaces and how you do it, given the kinds of the groups and issues and emotions and policy frameworks that you have to work within. Tabitha, I've got a question for you actually on this. Is you've talked about my place, the Arabic word, and thinking about the work that you do at Makini with displaced women and girls. How do you go about doing that, creating my place, a safe space for them? Yeah.
Sorry, technical. I think the first thing is that it takes time, and you can't rush it. It's difficult because we're all rushed for time, we're all rushed for resources. I think, you know, we run a charity where we're always trying to get the funding to run these projects and to create these spaces. And I think you can't just say, right, everyone come today, this is where you can be safe. It takes a lot of time and establishing and getting to know each other. And I think also what we do is we work very closely with an arts therapist. So we have somebody, we're not therapists, we're not qualified to hold that trauma. We create therapy. We always actually say, apart from our one theatre therapy project in Lebanon, which is run by a theatre therapist, we say we create therapeutic spaces. So, but we do have expertise in there, which is separate and distinct and is given time and attention alongside creative practitioners. So in the theatre project that we just ran in London, we had a professional theatre director, we had a playwright, we had a whole sort of technical lights and sound and everything team, but we also had a theatre therapist and actually someone supporting her who were there for that bit of it. And it really was necessary, because when you're trying to create a piece of theatre, that those people are quite busy doing that, but we're really about the impact on the participants. So we need to make sure that we're giving equal time and attention to the therapeutic element. I think for us, we would also say there's something about clear outcomes and shared values. So right from the beginning, if we're going to try and create a piece of theatre that's going to go on a London stage, we will say, even in the call for participants, that that's what we're going to do in the end. Because I think there's a kind of continuum between therapy and production to some extent. And if somebody's coming for therapy, they don't want to stand on a stage. But standing on a stage can also be therapeutic. So I think right from the beginning, being clear about what's going to happen in the end. And yeah, I think I'll stop there. Being clear, shared outcomes, shared values, knowing what's therapy, what's production, and having proper expertise in the room for us.
So it's almost like a sort of an embrace around your participants, isn't it?
Yeah,
you
it's
have
quite holistic.
all of these people in place to support them. I think I'm going to jump to Zeej actually and ask you about your thoughts actually on this, and to what extent having gone through this process on the project, to what extent you felt that the project facilitated sort of safe and inclusive spaces for you, you know.
Well, as I mentioned before, I didn't have any expectation, like what kind of place will be, or what kind of people. Everyone were included in the project, from participants to facilitators. We didn't feel like we are in a studying space, rather than it was a place where you feel safe, you feel like you can express yourself without judging. And at least my group they came from different cultural background. Like I was the only Saudi in the project as far as I know. And meeting new people from different cultures. So it was, inclusive, and this inclusivity played a major part in the project. The workshops were held in suitable, comfortable spaces or atmosphere where we can focus on creativity without being our concern about, it's like transforming from the reality to a safe place where you can express yourself, be disconnected from the asylum or refugee process, because this process itself can be overwhelming. What else? We talked about inclusivity, safer places.
I've seen Alisa smiling and nodding as you were talking. I'm wondering, do you want to add to that? Because I think he's describing your workshop.
It's so nice to hear you reflect back on that space. I think what I'm just thinking of my experience with you, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is about encouraging mistakes and failure and no space of expectation. I remember how first when you started working on your jacket, you were like, right, gotta get my culture in. And then I was like, wait, but you are your culture.
Yeah.
Speak about you, because that will come through, and your journey is what matters. And it's to me, it's about really seeing whole people and being our whole selves as facilitators as well. To me, a lot of it is about energy. It's about the energy exchange. It's about the energy you show up with. It's about having an open field and holding people in their difficult days, in their best days, and also actually checking yourself. I think this is a very important part. As a facilitator, what's so important for me is to always be monitoring where I am and what am I coming, and making sure that that doesn't impact the group. Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, thank you. Did you want to add to that? You look like
No,
you're good. You're good. You're
I'm
good.
just
Okay.
remembering.
Yeah. Thank you. Whilst you've all been talking, you've been touching on this theme of decolonizing and structures that you have to work within. You were talking about this, Malé, and the things that you're having to test and push against and bring in that might not necessarily be in the right place. So, spirituality and politics and some of the things you were describing that you brought in with your students. And I'm just wondering if, I suppose one of the names of the project was Decolonizing Fashion and Textiles, wasn't it? And there's this sort of growing debate and action around decolonizing design. And it's almost like a buzzword, isn't it? So I wonder, Malé, if you could give us an overview of what this kind of decolonizing thing means, and if there are any other terms that might be more useful or helpful, and what that might be. Just briefly, because I've been told we've got 20 minutes, so.
I'm gonna try to be brief.
Yeah.
It's not a brief
It's
issue.
not, is it? I'm so sorry.
I'm from Venezuela, and we have 500 years or more of colonizing, and it's impossible to decolonize us. That's a way of seeing it, that what we are is a hybrid of that colonization, and we are proud of speak half American, half Spanish, with no proper Spanish, no proper American, no? In Venezuela, for example, and I wouldn't change that for anything in the world. That is one way of seeing it. The other way of seeing it is that colonization is happening everywhere right now, and we are part of it in the system. So it's also very big to deal with it. I have zero tools.
You have zero.
I just think that, I bring back that the design is not neutral, as it's been painted for many years. We have a part on colonization, we have a part on capitalism, on consumerism, and we are not teaching or learning about what is the role of the designer in a decolonized place, for example. It's not going to be anymore about producing, mass producing, developing, amplifying, enhancing. It's going to be about taking care of what it is, of taking care of how we match design and degrowth. For me, that's a challenge. Every single framework is to maximize, to produce, to bring. How do we bring back what it is and take care of it? So that's my question, but I don't have any answer. This is what my practice is trying to explore, and every time that I find a way, I get back and go back and start again.
I think it's a really difficult question, and it's the wrong question, isn't it? Because especially if we think about it at UAL, all the different colleges use a different term for decolonizing. In one college, it's liberating the curriculum. In another one, it's anti-canon. And in another one, it's decolonizing or decentering. And the one that I really like, the actual definition I really like, is around anti-colonial thinking and practice, because you have a position then, don't you? You're anti-something, and then you talk about degrowth and capitalism and the things that you were talking about. But also, I love this way of reframing the discussion around anti-colonialism and the thinking and the practice, and thinking about, I think there's a writer called Priyamvada Gopal who talks about decolonization a way of us reframing and reshaping the conversations around the contributions of different cultures and communities to Europe and the sort of shaping of Europe, both materially, culturally, and in terms of knowledge making. So it's a different conversation then, isn't it? You start to think about the contributions, which is some of the things that Francesco had started to say, the contributions of all kinds of groups who come to this country or exist in this country together. So I think this idea of what is decolonizing and the definition of the word, etc., is a red herring in a way. It's actually what you're all doing, isn't it? But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. I'm supposed to be chairing.
Can I quickly a quick reaction? Yeah, I agree with all of you, but at the same time, decolonization is a fight that has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see what's happening in Palestine, and for more than we do pluriversal action and practice and welcoming contributions, the fight has to happen still. Yeah. One thing doesn't cancel the other, you know. Yeah. And maybe we are not the right people to do that, but that is a contest.
Yeah, ultimately it's about justice, isn't it? Ultimately it's about, transformation and thinking about a different kind of world and all of those kinds of things that we want to make happen. So absolutely. I'm aware that I've kind of gone off script and that the questions, we've had a few questions left, but I think we need to open it up to people here.
5 minutes and then we open up to the...
Yeah. Say that again?
To ask maybe the last round of questions for everyone, and then the audience can think about questions, and we have 10 minutes.
Okay, you've got a few minutes to come up with questions. So I'm going to ask, which question would you like me to ask? The fourth or the fifth? Or okay. Okay, right. If it's up to me, you've said it now. It's up to me. I can do what I like. Okay.
Is there any of the things that you'd like to share that's not been asked? Maybe you choose.
Yeah. So. We're going to ask you about this sort of transformative learning experience and the takeaways from the project so far. Maybe that's the question to ask right now is, in terms of the project and the work that you've been doing, changing lives and positions and thinking and practices, what's your takeaway? What are you thinking about in terms of where you are now compared to when you started on this journey? And maybe should I go in order? Zeej.
Yeah, sure.
What are your thoughts?
I can say after joining this project, it inspired me to consider fashion as a career, especially since I'm an artist and now I have some skills. So I get inspired to design t-shirts, and I already started like building the logo, the vision, and so on and so on. So I want to make this come true. Knowing these lovely people, I built up really good relationship with the team, the facilitators, with the participants. And I think this played a really crucial part in my life because you are in a new country, you need to build up relationships. And I'm so happy I joined this project, really. Gives me a lot of opportunity to develop myself emotionally, in my social life, and if I will talk about this, I will take 1 hour. So,
all right, I'll stop you then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do one of you want to sort of respond to that question as well? Tabitha, I'm looking at you then.
I just wanted to reflect actually on something that came out of Francesco's presentation, and I think also what Zeej just said, and also relates to the decolonization, anti-colonial debate. I loved what you said about what we have to throw away. But I wanted to say that the advocacy piece is really, really important. And speaking of learning, what we have learned since starting to work in the UK, is a slightly different context in Lebanon, is the British asylum system is continuing to oppress people. And, I don't know if it's I think it's a colonial system.
People come to this country having already experienced trauma, seeking sanctuary, and then they are further oppressed by the brutality of the system. And I think for all that we're creating safe spaces and all of that sort of stuff, we have to challenge that system because it's torturous, really. And so if we want to decolonize, yes, we must decolonize everywhere, but the system itself here needs decolonizing. And the advocacy piece is and the right to work and everything related to that is just so important in that. So we're newly working in this country, we're learning and trying to work out how to, have more leverage there.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I add something?
Yeah, no, not at all.
I think also being an associate lecturer and really working with people who are slightly younger than me, a lot of our art colleges and institutions are preaching a way of, be the star designer, be the star artist, and really contribute to the capitalist system, which is hierarchical, which is colonial in its model. And I think it's so important, the projects like Francesco is doing, like you were doing, where there are new ways of thinking and engaging that are brought to the surface of younger generations, because this is what we need to do growth, to really transition, is to really think communally and collectively. And I think a lot of damage is actually done within the academia and institutions because we're perpetuating these awful ways of serving the world, which are actually serving oppressive systems. So I feel it's my duty as an artist and designer to show up in a way where I'm always co-creating, where I'm not only focusing on my victories or my opinions, where I'm very much broadening the scope and integrating different ways of knowing and being, and really not only operating from my own lens, but really being open to different lenses and different cultural contexts. And I really want to inspire that within younger students, because there is, there are not enough clear examples of practice like that at the moment. And I think it's our duty as people, citizens in privilege in academia to really forward that way of working and find ways where it's also financially sustainable, because you can't do everything for free. So it's a really interesting part to play in this changing landscape. That feels important.
Thank you. I think it's really important to do, as you were talking about being an associate lecturer, to talk about unlearning, to talk about systems that may appear neutral as not being neutral, that, recognizing that even universities are colonial structures. And so, of course, the way that we operate will be within certain boundaries that need to be challenged and tested, not dissimilar to what you're saying about the asylum system being, wanting a particular outcome. So the conversations to reveal all of these things that may seem quite sort of neutral are essential. The actions to reveal some of these things are absolutely essential as well. And I'm going to end on action. Yes, I can see you nodding at me. Right, okay, right, we're turning this way. Thank you to the panel for that discussion. Thank you very much. Don't know how long we have for questions, but
7 minutes.
We have plenty of time for questions. So has anybody got any? Oh, one here.
Yeah.
So
I work as a textile artist and as an educator, and what I was thinking about was this idea of safe spaces. I've recently done a residency where we were looking at sustainability and mending, and what I found doing workshops with everyone was that just the act of mending and working with textiles was creating a safe space just in 10 minutes, because I was working with people just for a couple of hours, not over an extended period of time. So I'm wondering what any of you have found, like the idea of textiles just having their own sort of comfort and having that sort of heritage that you're looking at, like what are your experiences of that, the textiles themselves and the act of creating them, making their own safe space?
That question is not for me, of course.
For you.
Why?
For everyone.
I think it's
for everyone.
yeah.
It's for everyone, the question.
I think I'm going to
Dr.
ask
David.
one of
I
these
can-
two in the
I
middle.
just- I'm
Right,
aware that I
Alicia
spoke
or
last.
Tabitha. Yeah.
I'll be quick, maybe. I think just having a non-face-to-face focus and having something to work through as an item, it really pulls that focus from an individual, which is quite intense for a lot of people. And really, it's a common activity. You can be silent, you can drop in and you can drop out. That's beautiful. And you're in the same space for a prolonged period of time, also often in repetitive cycles of weeks and months. That creates a bond, but it's an indirect bond, yet it is direct at the same time. And I think that is just beautiful. And I think there's something about labor. It's about handwork. Again, it's embodied. You know, it's not thinking, it is thinking through the act of your hand. And I think that opens something up. I really feel it's really potent. Yeah.
I'd really agree with that. Yeah. I think it's doing that repetitive action. It's so calming, isn't it? And it means that you can talk to someone without having to be like, tell me.
Yes, all about your life.
Yes, exactly. You can just be sitting there and things can come up. Yeah. It's really healing.
Yeah. It's bringing the sort of physical, emotional, and the sort of rational together, isn't it? In a way, it's that kind of, which are very anti-colonial, actually. You know, you're supposed to separate those things, but maybe there's something else going on there. I've just had another look. Say, okay, any questions? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring. Thanks for your generosity in sharing so honestly. So my question is very brief. I just wanted to ask, how did you recruit in our ladies' workshop? It seems like you had quite a large number of people constantly in the sessions. That's one of the challenges when we do participatory research. So if you could share the methods of your or the magic of your recruitment, that would be great.
I was a participant.
So I was going to say, it's a question for Francesco, isn't it?
Well, actually, we had lots of different partners, including community centers, but actually, for instance, or even local authorities. I think the most effective strategy was to do outreach. So I went to the hotels where asylum seekers were staying. Also went to the British Red Cross, where the asylum seekers were receiving food, as well as in Stratford Library, where the council was providing services and information. I think that direct contact was the most effective way. And I didn't mention also, I had done a pilot project in the past, so I had some outputs that were created and seeing the physical work, as well talking about knowing what outputs, although we didn't know exactly what outputs we would create, but they could get a sense of what type of work we would do, and as well have the opportunity to see me, to start building some trust and relationship, and have the opportunity to ask questions. As well, then through all these charities, as well, it was challenging at the beginning, and as well because some of the participants don't kind of follow our capitalist communication channels, like for instance newsletters or emails, but then actually in the end this poster that I designed went viral and was in all WhatsApp groups, and but then we lost a little bit that direct connection, and then as well because it is very conceptual, and even how we frame fashion is very different. So some people came thinking they will learn a technical design course and say, you are the professor from London College of Fashion. To be honest, I can't sew anything. But it was so only when I was going there they would understand it was more the therapeutic more than the production. But yeah, that's the outreach is very key.
As well.
Do you mind if I add to that?
Flexible space, wasn't it?
I think just also I try to really work in the area I live and work in, which means I already have networks, and my WhatsApp is filled with amazing community groups and activators. So to me that feels really honest. That feels literally the ground I walk in every day, the community I participate in. And then recruitment becomes more of a local kind of affair, and that feels most potent,
And also just a very quick one as well for me, what was most powerful was also the networks and the word of mouth, like Zeej was invited by another friend, or some participants brought daughters or other members, or even in those WhatsApp groups where we were not involved, then one of the participants, I remember, she said, oh, this person thinks it's a technical design course, but then she was teaching other people what we mean by fashion. As well, a participant with severe language barriers, she completely got it, and then she would become the change agent, and then diffuse this idea that we have of fashion as a vehicle for social change.
It's fabulous, thank you.
Can I add something? But maybe it's not. I always come with a terrible side. But sorry, Francesco. But I want to also highlight the problematic of recruiting. Because, for example, I wanted to recruit displaced people in the capacity of experts. If you recruit experts in your investigation project, you will have to pay them. So we pay them per hour. And I wanted to pay an expert fee. Talk to the university or with the funder bodies about that. A nightmare. So then I had to look for a proxy organization that pay my participants as experts. And well, the how we were scrutinized for that process was terrible. But also then, what organization do we recruit to do that? We were questioning even the word refugee, and the organizations were very institutionalized. Organizations that work with trauma, with psychology, with housing, or local authority. We wanted to be open to work with illegal people, probably. And we didn't want to get our project embedded in any of these places. So how do we work in a holistic place? And then we finally ended up working with a small NGO that didn't have the capacity to do all the paperwork that the university was required. They have to employ a person for them to be able to work with that. And I don't know if the value that we offer kind of made it up for them. For them, it was the first time that they worked with a higher education organization, but the university took 3 months to pay them. And they don't have the cash flow for that. So even though we have social purpose labs and things like that, the fact that we're working with organizations that are small, that are very vulnerable, that they don't have the capacity to work with that, is something that we have to consider. From university to also funders.
All these structures, yeah. So can I just ask if any of the students that Malé talked about have any questions at all, or any thoughts about what we've been talking about? I'm just really aware we've not had any sort of student voice during this discussion at all. Not that I'm putting any students on the spot or anything, but I am really. Any thoughts or questions from any students? If not, is there one more burning question that we can take before we go and get some beverages? That put a stop to that then, didn't it? It was the word beverages, wasn't it? All right, I'm going to ask one final question of you guys then, and maybe just two of you could respond to this, which is around, it's a kind of future-facing question about what do you think we need to really focus on in the future to create this world that you're kind of aspiring to and trying to craft? Big question, sorry, but you know.
I think I'd go back to that piece about everything that we're trying to do is happening within a system which is oppressive, and we have to change the entire system. That's what's next.
So revolution.
Yeah, revolution.
Okay.
I will say, for us, the question of the future was very central, and I will say, whose future? So to know that there is no one future, to know that there is no in a straight line, but there are different ways of thinking about the future: circular, cyclicals, scattered, broken, violent. That have to be welcome. And we were working with this idea of utopia. And the utopia was productive and useful, not just because we were allowed to imagine different utopias with different time frameworks, but also because the activity or the act of imagining the utopia changed the present. It's a little bit like the medium and the connection with that. By imagining utopia is a present activity. So we found that very productive. So we were moving for that question of the future, but I don't know if that was...
Yes, it does. Sankofa, I'll say. That's all. Okay, go on.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if it's time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking
I
at
just wondered,
Francesco.
and since this opportunity, if you've had any like other opportunities since then that don't necessarily, relate to you being an asylum seeker or a refugee, like if it, if it's kind of encouraged you to do other things, but not because of that.
Nice
in the
question.
UK.
If I'm not asylum seeker, I wouldn't take the.
No, just any other projects that are creative maybe, but that aren't focused on where you've come from or where you're at, just what you're doing and what you're interested in. Does that make sense?
No.
What other opportunities you've had since doing this project?
He's becoming a fashion designer.
Okay.
Oh
You
yeah,
started studying.
I start to think about having fashion as a career, side career, because I used to be an entrepreneur. I had my own business in soap making when I was Saudi Arabia for 6 years. So I know when you are in your 20 you want to be a doctor, when you are in 30 you want to be something else. So soon when you are in your 40s you discover something else. So I'm one of these people, like I'm always eager to discover opportunities. And mixing and get advantage of my skills, like mixing this and this and make this and this, and
make it happen.
See what happens.
Thank you, Zeej.
Thank you.
I think I'm gonna do the job that I should have done 15 minutes ago and just thank the panel, bring this to a close. Thank the panel for being so honest,
Thank you for
so
having
warm
us.
and generous with all of your stories and sharing what you do. So can we just...
Can I also thank you because you did a great job on sharing all the different.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Nice.
Yes, thanks everyone.
So is it-
We have time, like 10 minutes if it's okay, because we are running behind the schedule. So you can enjoy some refreshments and network and chat a bit more. Thanks for coming back, and thanks for the audience online. I will be very quick. I just would like to introduce Toyin Gbomedo, who is an artist, PhD researcher at the London College of Fashion, and community organizer working at Citizens UK. She did the seeded residency at UAL last year. Was it last year? And she worked on this work. She developed this work called Stitches of Injustice. So she's delivering a spoken word performance for us. Over to you, Toyin.
Thank you, Francesco. In the heart of London, where fashion blooms, silent stories dwell in dim lit rooms of diverse communities, seekers of hope, toiling in shadows, facing life's cruel slope. Their nimble hands stitch dreams and threads in the garment factory where low pay spreads. Their weary eyes bear tales untold of struggles endured yesterday and stories yet to unfold. In London's alleys where fashion thrives, a tapestry woven by these fragile lives, they left their homelands seeking sanctuary, but found a path strewn with uncertainty. With each seam they sew a whispered plea for dignity, respect, and fair pay to see. Their talents undervalued, their worth denied, yet their spirits flicker, they refuse to hide. From distant lands their cultures blend, creating beauty trends that never end. Their diverse heritage a vibrant hue, embracing fashion's fabric anew. Through the bustling streets their dreams parade, unseen warriors in fabrics they've laid. Their resilience speaks of untold might. Amidst the darkness they seek the light. Their resilience is there and they speak stories untold there. Let us not turn a blind eye nor close our heart to these souls who play an essential part in The fashion industry's grand display, their voices yearn for justice day by day. For in their struggle lies a silent call to create a world where dignity thrives. In the silent call to recognize their worth, to break the wall, to create a world where dignity thrives, where fair wages echo in their lives. Let us weave a tapestry bound by compassion, where migrant workers find a solace, not ration. In the fashion industry's vibrant domain, let their dreams forever remain. Thank you.
This is amazing. Thanks, Toyin. So grateful for this. It was very meaningful. So I will pass the floor to Ciara Barry, who will chair the second panel on advocacy and policy, and will introduce the panelists. I will just introduce Ciara, who is a labor rights researcher and campaigner in the garment sector with a particular focus on living wages. She strives for workers' justice and not charity. Ciara is passionate about intersectional labor and environmental rights advocacy, especially with vulnerable and hard-to-reach workers, including refugees, home workers, migrants, and seasonal workers, and informal workers. Ciara is currently working for Fashion Revolution as policy and campaigns manager, and for UNHCR for a project called Made 51 to promote the economic inclusion of refugees in the global values chains. She's also associate lecturer and visiting practitioner at London College of Fashion, UAL.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Francesca. I think it was such an honour to be part of this, as a participant of the Fashion and Refugee Roundtable, and I'm really thrilled to be here with these three as well. I think we've got a really amazing panel tonight. And I think it's really important when we look at the advocacy and the policy side of it, I think dive into the report for the recommendations. But there's also, I'm really looking forward to a discussion on both the barriers to good work for refugees in the UK fashion industry, as well as some of the recommendations that we can put forward in order to kind of get further with this justice-led work. So I think for me, what really stood out as part of this process, you spoke, Francesco, about it being participatory, but the fact that refugee lived experience was really at the centre of these policy recommendations. I think as researchers, it's something that we talk a lot about. It's quite hard to do unless you're very intentional about it. So yeah, that's something that I really valued from it. So I'm going to start by introducing some of our panellists. So I'll start with you, Froi, because you're top of my page. So Froi is a lead organiser at Citizens UK and leads their North London team and a national team campaigning for better pathways to citizenship. He's organised and trained teams successfully negotiate with Amazon, BT Sport, Hackney Council and the NHS for laptops during COVID-19, for work programmes for young people and migrants, and a real living wage and better mental health services. Froi has led partnerships with Nesta and University of Arts London, and he holds dual British-Filipino nationality. So, thank you, Froi. We don't have Katherine, so I'll skip there. But next we have Ben, who has extensive experience as a dedicated advocate for refugee empowerment, with over 15 years of experience working closely with refugees and asylum seekers through organisations including British Red Cross. Ben has honed his expertise in managing and developing creative programmes that help individuals with feeling more confident and welcome in their new community. So in addition to his current role at Waltham Forest Council, where he is managing the borough's sanctuary strategy, Ben is also co-director at a programme called I Speak Football that supports recently arrived refugees and asylum seekers with learning English and building a sense of community through sport. He's a strong believer in co-production, and this is embedded within the I Speak Football programme, where he has established a staff advisory board consisting mostly of young refugees who lead on the design and implementation of the programme. And we then have Professor Azadeh, who is a professor of public policy at Teesside University and an interdisciplinary scholar in the field of migrant homemaking and the politics of integration. Her research she combines research, artistic and curatorial practices to explore these dynamic areas. Her extensive participatory research developed in collaboration with diverse communities across the UK, Sweden, Germany, Netherlands and Denmark delve into those complexities of social integration. So lots of amazing experience. So if I start with the first round of questions, so starting with you, Froi, do you want to tell us a bit about your experience at Citizens UK and your experience in this project in relation to advocacy and policy change?
Absolutely. And so I guess from my first foray into thinking about systems change, as was like talked about a lot in the first part of today, was back in 2018. As part of an event, we were campaigning just before the local elections for the next mayor of Hackney. Back then, we had a room full of 200 people from different faith groups, community groups, thinking about how do we win change. And we knew that the mayor of Hackney back then there's some resistance, I should say. We were campaigning with things like more resettlement for refugees and asylum seekers and a paid work program for those who are refugees. And there was a moment during the meeting where we organised it so everyone would stand up to really lead and put pressure on the mayor of Hackney. And in the moment, he changed his mind. And he agreed to work with us, and it was a real pleasure meeting the people who benefited from that. And I think for me, what that really speaks to is the fact that systems are there, but they can be changed. They can be changed. And I guess for us, what is the opportunity to make that change? And for people who have to suffer with the indignity of some of the systems we find, to be leading that change as well. And so when I met with Francesco, and he just told me about what he was planning to do, I was like, yes, absolutely. This sounds something that's really aligned with a lot of the way we think about the world as community organisers, but also just sounded really fun. Yeah. And so very quickly, there were some really, really important projects back then. This was back last year during the illegal immigration bill, and us outside Houses of Parliament with some of there's a crowd of about 200-300 people behind, and some of the posters and flags that were made by some of the UAL staff and students. Sadly, we lost that. We were campaigning against child detention. We lost by 8 votes in the House of Lords, which was really sad. But now with this new Labour government, I think that's a really big opportunity. And so thinking about the stories coming up from the participants, thinking about, well, actually, what is the direction we want to move into? And for them, just the real sense of frustration that they can't provide for themselves. They have to suffer the indignity of not being able to take their children to school, to be able to go to the doctors, and just really simple things like that. Many asylum seekers today have to survive on £8 a week. That's just not survivable. Yeah. And so really thinking about asylum seekers' right to work, thinking about when they get their status, how they can provide for work, was something that really came out in what we call our listening campaigns, and led to some of the policies that we're advocating today. And so just really excited to have been part of this project, but also to met the people who are leading from the front, and seeing them develop in confidence, both through their artistic sense, but also thinking about them as political people as well.
Yeah, fantastic. If you just go back a couple of slides, Francesco, sorry, was that a UNHCR refugee tent that
Yes.
the dress was made of? Wow, that's amazing.
So that's made by one of Francesco's colleagues, Helen Story, at LCF. When I saw that, I was like, yes, we need to bring that to the day.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then moving on to you, Ben. Based on your experience at Waltham Forest, how has the council developed in delivering the Borough of Sanctuary framework? So tell us about that. What is a Borough of Sanctuary?
Yes.
And what is the role for local authorities to work on the issues we're talking about?
Obviously that's where I met Francesco. So Francesco's actually on our sort of Borough of Sanctuary steering group. Just to give you a little bit of a background. So obviously the Borough of Sanctuary, and Sanctuary itself is all about, obviously, as you could imagine, being inclusive, finding opportunities for refugees and asylum seekers to really have a voice in what happens, but empowering them in a number of different ways, whether it's sort of accessing employment, education, training, volunteering, all of those kind of opportunities, and really trying to sort of spread the word and raise awareness about the sort of injustices that refugees and asylum seekers face, a little bit like what you said about asylum seekers and what they get per per week, which is obviously extremely low. But I mean, even if you're a sort of refugee, it's extremely hard to sort of access work, and we need to sort of think about ways of improving that. But so Sanctuary is awarded by the City of Sanctuary, so obviously they will sort of assess what kind of work is going into making a sort of borough, for example, a place of sanctuary. Are there opportunities for schools to think about being more inclusive, finding ways of empowering their students to sort of express themselves, but also providing a welcoming environment for students? So that, that would include, things like having a buddying system at schools, or, for example, having a real sort of focus on sort of refugee rights, like maybe it's like having a sort of book month around refugees, that kind of thing, focusing on Refugee Week, so little elements like that which are really important. And I think for the Borough of Sanctuary, I mean, what we've been sort of working towards, and each borough will do things differently. So I think you've got at least 6 or 7 boroughs within London who are already sort of boroughs of sanctuary.
Okay.
But they will do it in a specific way. So ours is, it's called a Spock service. It sounds a little bit Star Wars-esque or something like that. But it's actually a single point of contact. So it's actually a Star Trek. Sorry, yes.
Star Trek, sorry.
No, you're right. But so it's a single point of contact where refugees and migrants can access support, whether it's accessing education, accessing employment, accessing training, volunteering, all of those kind of things. Which I think is really essential, particularly as, a lot of these services that they try to use aren't really able to communicate to them properly. Whether there's a lack of interpreting, there's a lack of cultural understanding, there are a number of different barriers which stop people from accessing services. So Spock is one area that we've really focused on in terms of supporting refugees and migrants. Yeah. We've actually got 2 schools of sanctuary now within Waltham Forest, so again, that's all around like seeing how inclusive schools are being, what provision they have, what kind of training they're having in terms of supporting groups who might have suffered from trauma, for example, students who have suffered from trauma. We also have actually recently, in the last year or so, have welcomed 100 families from through the Ukrainian scheme, but also the Afghan scheme, into Waltham Forest. So, and obviously there's a lot of sort of wraparound support that goes into that with this box service and other teams that we have. And the last one is just trying to, when we're talking about sort of, making things a lot more fair, thinking about like the sort of the work area, I think that's extremely important. So what we've tried to focus on, and what we're looking to do a lot more, is making sort of inclusive pathways for people into work. So trying to sort of like adjust some of the sort of job fairs that you have, which are obviously for native speakers, which are not, there's no sort of streamlining process, there are no simple ways for people to access work. So thinking about ways that we can sort of develop that with employers, for example.
Great, all sounds so inclusive and participatory, and I think especially small things like having one point of contact, it's not a small thing, but that really helps. A lot of my research looks at like who slips through the cracks, and the most vulnerable communities that we can't reach, hard to reach populations, and I think structures like that are really good at making sure that people are not lost through signposting and other things. It makes a big difference. And great, and moving on to you, Azadeh, can you tell me a bit about your research and your artistic practice in political science and migration, and what role do you think art has in advocacy and influencing policy change?
Absolutely. I think many of my projects, similar to colleagues earlier, participatory research, and I think within the project that you can see here, nature-based integration, connecting communities within nature, we started our work with Home Office integration framework, the policy that was set, which enables but also limits access to greener spaces. So we started to look at how green and blue spaces can bring long-term residents, newcomers, migrants, and environment together in a way. What are the elements that could be potential for better integration, or how they could come together? So I think through various participatory workshops, artistic workshops, and this is the Home Office integration framework. So our aim in this project was to change that policy to bring leisure and access to greener space as one of the indicators of integration, because
Without that, local councils that we are aware of as part of our case study wouldn't have the budget to create activities that would provide access to greener spaces. So greener spaces, you may think, is just a park, but yeah, it's also a place people go and heal from all the trauma. That's a place they spend time with their family. They look at others who look alike with them. And in many parts of the UK, that's not the case. Traveling to a greener space is a trouble for many of them. Many don't have the transport, many don't have the access, many don't have the payment to pay for the car park that has been increased, the parking fees. And alongside that, if they go there, they don't see anybody like them, so they don't go because it's just not their space. So how we can bridge that, it's only with the local councils. We worked in this project with London Borough of Haringey, Blackburn with Darwin, and Stornoway in Isle of Lewis. The reason being was urban, pre-urban and rural landscape, to see if there is a large vast of greener spaces, what would that impact on people? And if it's like an urban space like London, how would that impact social integration, and what are the rules that could be played? Art was the language for us to communicate with our participants. Like the panel before, art was the element to drop the barriers. Art was the space for sharing. Art was the space, some of them would say, make them wake up and come out of the house, otherwise they wouldn't for days. So art was the enabler in this project. For us was fun because we could make together, we could experiment, we could learn from them. Many herbal leaves and medical herbs that they found, they told us, we didn't even know about. So this became a story of learning for us as our research team, but also with them through the process. Here you can see the case studies that we have been working on. This project was funded by Nuffield Foundation and the British Academy, and we're now working for a larger project. This was a 2 years project, and we are working now with the larger application to get a bigger budget to enable a more extensive contribution to the area that we believe is important for the life of newcomers, whether migrants, asylum, because also in that category there are a lot of unfair circumstances. Like Ukrainian can work from the beginning when they arrive here, so they are called Ukrainian guests, and take it from there. Yeah, so it's very different where you're coming from as a migrant. That sets where you can, what you can, and how you can do it. And someone said about revolution, I'm all for it.
Fantastic. So back to you, Froi, and local community organising. I think organising from the ground up is very hard for those of us that do it. It's difficult, but I think it really is the bedrock of social justice and genuine movement in society. So considering the issues faced by refugees in the UK, what role can community organising play, and how can we design and offer campaigners the chance to contribute towards policy advocacy?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, the really heart of our work is relationships. And I think, that's the real challenge that we have when people demonize people that they don't know for how, them trying to claim safety. There's a lack of relationship there, and I think that speaks to a lot of the polarization in society. But also, how many of us, to what extent do we know our neighbours in our communities? We did some work in North London where, led by some of the migrant organisations and synagogues there, just went into the hotels and started what we call listening campaigns, just understanding what the big challenges being faced there. We had stories from a lack of just quality food. Some of the people there are just really hungry, like children losing weight, really disturbing to hear. But again, like I mentioned before, parents not able to take the child might be able to get to school because they've got a Oyster Zip card, but the parent doesn't. And sometimes the parent might be moving to different hotels, and that just causes a lot of difficulty in getting their children to access education for their children or for themselves. And really, the importance of kind of what I've found from doing this work is just the importance of relationships. Thinking about relationships with your neighbours, relationships between organisations, lots of organisations have a sympathy towards the plight of asylum seekers and refugees, but to what extent are they working with each other? I think that's the real critical thing that I think that our politics faces day to day. I think it's really easy for us to feel very isolated in a bubble, but if you take any road within London and within this great city, and you just go to all the organisations there, you will find just a lot of connection. Like people like agree on quite a lot. In particular, like when it comes to issues around asylum refugees, because they face it. They face it, whether the local faith groups, community groups. And so I think for me, that's the big challenge of today. You know, are we able to dedicate time to build relationships with each other for those who we don't know, and thinking about, well, actually, what can we do together? I think that's an opportunity for all of us. You know, UAL, for example, with some of the work you do with students, you know, to what extent are they rooted in their communities? You know, do they have a sense of like the organizations in their community? How can they be part of that change? And my goodness, I mean, when the students I meet, they're really energized by this. They're really energized when they look into the world and see how broken it is. What's our job to kind of ensure that the next generation is able to win like the systemic change that we really need in the coming months and years ahead?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we lead increasingly fragmented, isolated lives, and I think that lack of connection is what really enables the demonization of the other, because if you're not connected to one another, it's much easier to dehumanize, basically. So hard to agree on that one. Ben, I'm going to go a bit off script here. This isn't the second question you got. But I'm really interested in your I Speak Football campaign. I wanted to give you a chance to tell us a bit about that, and I'm really interested in how we can use sport as an access point to refugee inclusion.
Well, I mean, I'm really interested in how we can use art in terms of refugee, but I think we don't even sort of need to focus on sport, but I think there's so many things which can be a universal language that can break down those barriers.
Exactly.
Obviously, we've used something that's obviously very, very popular. So obviously, football felt like a way of doing it. So this is me and the team with the advisory group. So we've actually set up an advisory group which is consisting mostly of young refugees, as well as other people who are just really interested in what we were doing, who just randomly sort of applied to us through LinkedIn. So that we've got about 30 applications, and we've got about 8 advisory board members, 5 of them young refugees. The others have a lot of expertise, so they've been on panels before, they've worked with the UN or different things, but they were just really interested in what we were doing. So the thing I like about it is, as well, it's not a refugee advisory board, it's actually people who share different experiences. And again, it's all around that sort of engagement, that communication, collaboration, which is so important, as well as sort of solidarity in a lot of ways. I Speak Football started because it was started by our founder, Jibril, who himself is a migrant from Ivory Coast, and he found it very difficult to access language classes because it was quite foreign to him. It was culturally very different, very strict, very formal. He found his voice on the football pitch, and that's where he learnt a lot of his language that he could then almost translate into the classroom. So he started this project probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and since then we've just sort of developed. We've gone back to our roots a little bit and sort of set up this advisory board, which will hopefully start to sort of help us with leading and designing the program itself. So we're hoping that some of these guys and girls will become, whether it's like football coaches with us or run some of the events. One of them's already the co-chair of the advisory board. So it's a real way of sort of helping them with like progressing, like adjusting to their sort of new living environment. A lot of them obviously still face extreme hardships. So it's being aware of that and doing things in what we sort of term a sort of trauma-informed kind of way, which is really acknowledging their background and trying to meet them at a level where they're comfortable. So a little bit like what we've talked about. I mean, we talked about the sort of handcraft stuff that you can do. I mean, we use play therapy in a lot of our I Speak Football sessions, and I Speak Football itself is obviously we've got the advisory board. I Speak Football is a combination of time in the classroom and time on the football pitch, but using the sort of language of football in a way. So people are sort of like learning English through football. But we use a lot of sort of play therapy within the work that we do, because we find it's a way of people sort of connecting. It's not non-verbal in a lot of ways, so it means that people aren't like stressed about like introducing themselves. You learn each other's names. We had one person on the advisory board who said he had never done a game like that, which was so simple, just throwing the ball to each other and learning each other's names. And he said that, you know, he was able to remember everybody's name within 5 minutes, and he struggles to do that within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, you know, just something as simple as that can really sort of transform the room in a lot of ways. And I think it's great to hear people talking about safe spaces. And I think also another thing we need to think about is sort of raising that up a little bit and think about brave spaces as well, you know, where people can start to really sort of tell their stories. And that's what we're really trying to do. So at the moment, we're sort of allowing people to sort of take the platform on our LinkedIn pages, like promoting the work that we're doing, profiles of each of the advisory board members who are happy or comfortable to sort of tell their story, which I think is really important as well.
Fantastic. Sounds great. And coming back to artists and designers now, how can artists and designers go about developing skills and mindsets that will help develop, you know, the policy recommendations in this paper? So good work for refugees. How can designers and artists, think about what kind of mindsets do you think they need to use to stand in solidarity with those issues?
Absolutely. I think it's called a sort of multi-layered issue. So I think within our work, we really our project was under the umbrella of understanding communities. So we were in a mission to find out the voices that were not usually captured, the individuals who wouldn't walk through the parks, that they would be able to complete a survey. So we were in a mission to reach out to the one that wouldn't actually come out of the house. So how we do that, how we capture those voices that are not heard, and how do we hear their needs, that we can translate it to a policy that could help them access better green spaces. They wouldn't speak English, similar to your project, Ben, and this was one of the challenges we had, how we can bridge that, and art was the element for that. We could draw where you like to go to the park, where do you usually walk, so how can we manage that, and what are the times that you are out. These were all, obviously we had a team of policymakers from the start of the project working with us in each local council, and also we had policy practice team, which were similar to what you mentioned as advisory board, were from local members, community members, part of our panel research team. We trained them for 2 weeks, various ethics and research data gathering, which must be very boring for everyone. And so I think it was really to embed the idea of policy making from the beginning, from the outset of thinking through the project, planning the project, and considering what could be someone's need who cannot even speak the language we are commonly sharing here. What are the other languages that can become a space of sharing? What are the elements that could make them more comfortable to share with us? We tried to recruit community members as part of our team that could speak various languages of those demographics, that could enable easier community binding, but also a sort of translator in between if they wanted to share some of their inspiration as part of the project. And I think in our exhibitions as a public event, we had mayors of each local council attending. We had reviews on the local newspapers. We took this to the parliament and presented this to a wider audience. These were the steps we could take with our means to voice what was the need and how it can be dealt with. We're not sure how has been done or could be done. We are on a follow-up on that. But I think similar to your project, I really liked it. I think it's very important to consider how we can come together in a space that can enable other things to happen with the response to a larger picture of policy making, because if they don't decide, there isn't the money to take people in a bus to the park nearby. So that's as simple as that. And I think as an artist and designer, if we want to be one, I think our responsibility is to serve people, for people, with people. So I think if we start there, I'm sure all of us can make
positive steps to collectively try to make some positive changes, I hope.
Absolutely. So Froi, if we go back to the recommendations in the paper, I think we've got some fantastic, really revolutionary, if we could get these implemented for central government, for local government, for fashion brands, for SMEs, but we don't want them to sit in a research paper. These recommendations are only as good as they're disseminated out and enacted in policy, actually. Like, we want to see them, come to life and, brought into law, let's hope. So you spoke earlier about a change of government and an opportunity there, but do you have any advice on or thoughts around disseminating and actually implementing these policy asks into practice?
Absolutely. I mean, when we had a discussion about how, what we wanted to do, for me it was really important that there was like a wide range of, I guess we call them targets, like who can we engage with. I think there's some like just really fundamental things where a lot of the participants were really angry that they couldn't work while they were claiming asylum, and some of these people have been claiming asylum for like years, which is like this process shouldn't take more than 6 months. And I've regularly meet people who waiting 5, 6, 7 years, and so it felt like, even though do we necessarily get a meeting with Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer to talk about this? Maybe right now, possibly not, but the strength of feeling was that we had to include this in our report, and so we did. But as well as kind of national government and a new Labour government, like there's a range of kind of stakeholders that we can engage with. I mean, the team at LCF have been really fantastic engaging with local government level, thinking about Waltham Forest Council in particular, who, from my opinion, you do some really fantastic work at a local level. So thinking about local boroughs, where is there energy and opportunity? Local companies, and kind of there's like fashion districts in East London as well, so there's lots of pieces there. But also the Mayor of London's office as well. So the Mayor of London, the GLA, the budget for adult education is now devolved to that level. To what level can we influence that level to kind of be thinking about people in this situation? And so for us, but if I have to really distill everything in terms of the main thing that all of us in this room should be thinking, we talked before, people say we want to change the system, calling for revolution. The key thing we need to be thinking about is, what power do we have? I mean, that's it. If you have power, you can make change. If you don't have power, you can't. For us, as a community organiser, it's a very simple equation. Like, either you have the power to get a meeting and try to affect a change, or we don't. And for me, like, sometimes when you make change, I mean, these things feel so big, like from climate change to like, the hostile environment. And it feels like we try to do everything at the same time, or we do nothing and we just talk about it. We go to the march, we go on social media, but then we go home. But it doesn't need to be this kind of this polarity. There, if you build a team of 10 people, you could do something at a local level. And I think that's the main message, I think, as community organisers, we really, really push. Can you build a team? Can you build a team of people? Can you build a team of organisations, as we do at Citizens UK? And I think by then, like, you can begin to think about, well, maybe we can't meet with the Prime Minister, but maybe you can meet with the local councillor or the leader of my local council. And I think definitely with this project, I mean, with my colleagues who are working in East London, both in Waltham Forest, Newham and in Hackney, there's some really excitement. Lots of people are already talking about employment for refugees, and so I'm really excited about how this project will transition from a research project to something actually to a live campaign where these asks won't be just put on a shelf like this to gather dust, but actually will be put in front of a table. Like, we want to work with you to see this being delivered. What can we do to work together? So I'm really excited about that stage, working with my colleagues in East London.
Yeah, we can feel the excitement. I think you're sharing it around, but I think it's so true what you said is, like, just look at where you have leverage. This all, we can or we can't, it just gets us nowhere, that all or nothing. And I think it's like we all have leverage somewhere, and what buttons can you push to make a difference locally, and then that can be scaled up. But Ben, coming on to you, one of the local authority recommendations in the report was to deliver skills training while you wait programs for asylum seekers as well as recent refugees until they have the right to work. We're hearing that this is much longer than it should be, but in the meantime, what skills training can we do? I just wondered if you could speak a bit about the education and skills working group that you have at the borough, and thinking about that policy recommendation in practice in terms of connecting refugees with fashion enterprises, for example.
I mean, that was exactly what I was going to say. Connecting refugees to fashion enterprises. But no, I think there are a number of different elements. So I think within education and within the sort of the adult education budget, it's worth knowing, and obviously we do a lot of research into what residents, refugees, and asylum seekers are able to access. And obviously we've supported a number of asylum seekers with accessing courses that go beyond just purely English. So whether it's sort of getting into health and social care, or accounting, bookkeeping. So there are a number of courses that people can do to sort of start to get those skills, even when they're waiting as an asylum seeker. I think we definitely need to do more, and particularly sort of looking at areas where there is a need. So for example, we've been working with employers and businesses, as well as the sort of adult learning service in Waltham Forest, to try and deliver bespoke language classes that are aimed at a particular industry. So for example, getting people into sort of construction work who probably have a background or experience of doing that kind of work, helping them with gaining the sort of qualifications that they need to get into that work. Or it could be something around fashion, the same kind of thing, where you sort of tailor make a class that can sort of help people with learning English, whilst at the same time helping them sort of learn sort of like fashion industry words or vocabulary, those kind of things. So like really sort of hands-on training, which I think is really important. So I think those are some of the sort of the key issues. And I think another thing is obviously really looking at how we can make sure that everyone is able to access education. That's obviously a key element of it. I think that there are a lot of boroughs in the UK, in London, who are not boroughs of sanctuary, have not reached that level where they're actually able to sort of specialise in a service where they support people with accessing education. And it's extremely difficult if you go to the job centre and try and ask somebody how you can go to college, because they're not going to help you with that. They're just going to say, I'm sorry, but all we can help you with is your benefits, your work. So I think it's really about trying to use the knowledge that we have to support people into education. And I think obviously within Waltham Forest we've been able to, I think we've got a sort of succession rate of about 75% of getting students, prospective students, into colleges, which is sort of almost double that of the sort of national average, which is I think really important. And I think it's all about sort of embedding that, using the knowledge that we have within Waltham Forest to support other boroughs, but other boroughs are doing things a lot better than us. So, I think it's all about sharing that knowledge and like you said, sort of really sort of engaging with other groups who are doing things well. We could learn a lot in Waltham Forest about how to run job fairs, for example, because there are a number of other boroughs who are doing that much better than we are. So there's a lot to learn, but I think, in terms of education and skills, it's definitely about sort of embedding that, allowing the maximum amount of people to sort of access education.
And when you reach out to industry, say you mentioned the fashion industry, but also the construction industry, is there appetite from who you're speaking to help you with, these are the terms I need to know, these are the sorts of skills and language?
So yeah, I mean, so I think, so we've got an employment team who work with businesses, and the businesses are very keen to recruit. I think the point is getting the numbers that we need to sort of actually start a course. So there's the potential to start a sort of a construction course, which would allow people to get those qualifications to then go on and work. But I think it's it's having that bridge, because often, if an individual is going to an employer, it's just that much more difficult. So like finding those pathways in terms of like streamlining the process is going to be the way forward in terms of accessing work.
Very impactful as well, if you can get that right. And Azadeh, I was thinking a lot about, so I do a lot of living wage campaigning in the fashion space, and I think because poverty pay affects fashion workers all over the world, including UK garment workers and other areas of fashion. There's a lot of unpaid internships in fashion and a lot of exploitation going on. So of course, when we look at these policy recommendations, we want more jobs, we want people to have access jobs, but it's also about the right kind of jobs. It's not just jobs for job's sake, it's work that is decent and fair. So when you think about design researchers kind of setting up alternatives, means of connecting refugees with fashion apprentices, how can we do that in a way that challenges this kind of exploitative nature of a lot of the work in the fashion industry? How can we make sure that we are pushing the dial on getting refugees into the UK fashion industry, but also making those jobs fair and decent? Big question, I know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how, really. So I can contribute as much as I can, but I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that. I think within the last panel, we realized what are the gaps and how the energy and talents of individuals can contribute to creating a different culture in fashion. And I think one of the facilitators really generously described how this space was not just fashion as clothing, but as a culture, as a story. And I think to create that bridge between that being to enterprise, I'm not sure I'm the right person to connect those two. But I think thinking about these two elements, I think what I can say is trying to understand the needs of the community and what could be enablers to create that, as you mentioned, a straightforward process from recognizing the individual's talent and the gap in the market, and how we can create a step-by-step accessible procedure that enables those inputs to be incorporated to our business cycle, if you wish. So I think sometimes the paperwork puts everyone off, not just academics, but individuals who are not really familiar with those paperworks. It just makes it very difficult, even to the first step. Having a drop-in session in your local community centre, I found it really inspiring in London Borough of Haringey, to have that direct access community resettlement group were represented in the community centre, so they could go individually there and ask, how can I fill this form, or how can I talk to my landlord, or these basic things. I think if we can put in place procedures that enable those step-by-step for everyone in an equitable way, rather than one for all, that would make it definitely feed into your query. But going back to your point of power, I don't think, me personally, I have no power to make that changes. As an artist and curator, I can only make problems visible, and I can only create quantitative data that could back up my evidence that says this need exists, and this is the solution from what we gathered. This is the way we could work together. Can we come to a table and talk about it? Because you will notice in many of our projects, we work with local authorities that from one office to another, they don't know what could be done than what they are working. And our project becomes a space of sharing in a way. So I think we can bring the forces together to make a better, smoother, more straightforward, less waste of time, because we're actually all working towards the same thing. Like in our project, we started first with resettlements group in local authorities, and then environment group, then health and well-being, then community cohesion. So these 4 team departments came together, which they were having the similar concern than our project, but they were working separately. So this is actually more resourceful in a way. So I think, going back to your question, there are different ways to do that locally, communally, and within our team, but also individually. And if we can start by embodying that space of, let me ask the others, how can we do this together? And is there a similar project in our building happening that we don't know about? So I think that would waste a lot of emails and energy, and would actually get something done for community, because going back to that, we are there to provide that service. We are for community, and we need to think with them, and there is no other way around that. And if we want to bridge any gaps, we need to start from our own desk, the next to us, and the neighbors with us. And I think last panel also arrived to a wonderful conclusive words, that it was to communally and collectively think together. And I think I should stop there.
No, I think that's a wonderful answer. I think so much true what you say about the duplication of efforts, and if we can share learnings, I think we can get a lot closer to solving the problem. But I'm looking at the rest of the panel in case there are any other ideas on that, or either of you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, to pick up what you're talking about, you don't have power. But if you can bring those people into the room, I would argue you do have power. Because, you know, no one, it's very easy to ignore an email. I've ignored a few in my time. But that's it, right? Because, like, very few of us have the power to make the change that we want. But we live in a system, right? And there will be people who do have that power. How do we bring them to our table so we can have that conversation? But also it's a challenge to an agitation to us. Like, how are we powerful enough so they come? And I think that's a really challenging point. Lots of people feel very uncomfortable about that. But if we're not powerful, working with our people, like, who will be?
Yeah.
I mean, like, a lot of these issues, like when we talked about, we did this big action outside the London City Hall to ask for free bus travel for asylum seekers. And like we were out there, we were asking for this change, and we met with the Deputy Mayor for Transport, and he said, I didn't know. I did not know that this was an issue. And for me, the onus is on us to be thinking about who can we work with? How, like, if it was just Citizens UK by ourselves, we just there with 5 people, we probably wouldn't have got that meeting. But we're out there with 100 people from like 10 different organisations. I think that's the challenge of our day. If we want to make sure that our people, you know, people who've been through traumatic incidences have a voice to like change that. How are we powerful enough so they can have a seat at the table with people with the power, the money, and the people to make that change? And that's in our hands. We can do that.
Yeah.
Like you did.
I'd like to add something, if that's okay. I think as an academics, we also need to consider translating our methods to an understandable and accessible elements. I think I've witnessed this quite a lot, and I'm still in the exercise of learning it, but I like to share this with you, that policymakers don't like large, long, quantitative data. They can only engage with one paragraph. And how we as academics can teach our classes and work with our colleagues and start to work in a smaller version of written words, but more impactful written words. Doesn't have to be a large essay to make change. It has to summarize. We should be able to, as a group of educated academics, to turn it to a one paragraph that is understandable by everyone, accessible to all, and impactful. If we can practice that, I think our activities that are rich, incredibly rich, can faster turn to action, because otherwise, obviously for REF, we all produce this brilliant body of work, but it's not just that. We also are responsible for the society we live within. And to make changes, we could consider this translation faster and proactively. You're not asked always, we are not always asked to produce an evidence for Parliament or write summary policy briefs. In some of our projects we do, but why not that could be our exercise on a daily research? Why not to think immediately, okay, this is a 5,000 word essay. How can I turn it and translate it to a policymaker if I'm on a dinner table tonight and sitting next to one? It happens. You know it happens. So why not having it on hand and action it rather than waiting for someone to put time for it to be read and action? Sorry.
I just want to add to that, and I think there is something around transcending sectors in a lot of ways. So, you know, what we've actually done is, because we want to make our work trauma informed, is we've reached out to a few people who have that kind of background, who are specialists in that kind of area, which is really important. But we've also reached out to academics who are specifically looking at, you know, one academic is looking at sports and leisure activities and the effects that they can have on young refugees. So very specific, but she specifically looks at some of the sort of negative aspects that can happen within those kind of environments. So what we've done is actually now created a team who will look at doing some kind of training the trainers model, where we will look to support people within the industry, within football, within sort of a language provision, with understanding how to work with refugees and asylum seekers. So obviously we'll be on a panel who will be sort of doing that, but using the Refugee Advisory Board with their experience to come in and actually lead on some of that training, which I think is so important. It's bringing different groups together, but maybe, you know, we could think about not just sort of talking about sort of grassroots football coaches, but bringing in clubs to sort of understand a little bit more about how it works, think about how that can sort of, as you say, just those little actions you can take can potentially sort of change sort of institutional racism within football. Not that it will. I think that it's going to take a lot of work for that, but issues like that, you know, I think starting small is what we can do, and that's where we should start. But thinking about how we can sort of reach out to sort of like transcending those sectors, so that there are other people who sort of bring a lot of other sort of expertise and knowledge.
Totally. I feel like I'm taking it all in, what you've all said, but I would really speak to, if you do get to speak to policymakers, as few words as possible, bullet points. If you're emailing them, just really reducing it down. Something we do at Fashion Revolution is we bring out these big reports, but we challenge ourselves to what is it in one word, one phrase, one sentence, one paragraph. That's not our idea. I think we read that somewhere. So yeah, I don't know who to credit it, but I think challenge yourself really hones your messages, and I think it's really important if we want them to land. So finally, last round of questions. I was just going to love to finish with asking you all kind of a question on what next. So if you could wave a magic wand, what would you change? One thing would you change today to kind of unlock this decent work for refugees? So, you know, would it be an idea or more research or an action? But if you just had one wish, what would it be for you to wish today? I'll start with you, Froi.
That the work we built from this is so powerful enough that we get to meet with Yvette Cooper, and she says yes. I agree.
Put it out
We
there
should-
for it.
Yeah, I agree. Let's make this happen.
Ben?
Me?
Yeah.
I think, you know, I think what this project has really sort of honed in on, which I think is excellent, is also, you know, and what I saw as I walked through the storytelling element of the work is so important. I think that, you know, and when I talked about like moving from safe spaces to brave spaces, I think there's a real need to think about how we can empower individuals from refugee, asylum-seeking backgrounds to really speak up and be heard. I think that's something that's going to really break down barriers and potentially reach people in powerful positions, because I think that's when things start to change. You know, I think that has to, you know, you have to sort of engage a lot with the local community. And I think, you know, from working in the sort of like the refugee sector for a long time, I know that there's an important with like creating these safe spaces, and we do create those safe spaces, but we also need to be brave about it. And I think, you know, that comes with, you know, just people being able to tell their stories, being able to use the skills that they have, and, you know, start to sort of really change things from within. So that's what I would wish for, more storytelling.
Absolutely. Changing hearts and minds. And Azadeh?
So I think I echo both your suggestion, and I think I wish for recognition for participants and refugees and asylum seekers. That's my only wish, and that includes infrastructure in institutions that we can pay for their contribution. We can recognize their values as co-researchers. We can enable working with NGOs in the UK a smoother process, because I had a project in Sweden, Denmark, UK. The only NGOs that were present in my symposium were UK based, and we talked about why, because there was a gap that government couldn't cover, so NGOs are covering, but NGOs' problem was like, we can't sustain this. We are overworked. We have 5 people working day and night. We have 300 young asylum seekers taken care of. So I think for us as researchers in academic institute, which is quite secure if you compare it to NGOs operation, and unfortunately we are not designed for working with NGOs or communities. And if we actually want to work with communities, we should enable easier collaboration, because it's so embarrassing when they are not paid. It's so embarrassing when
a signature takes 3 weeks. Well, it's so embarrassing when they're working their heart out and we're just sitting there behind the desk passing to the other one, like you have to describe the whole story again to get a signature. I mean, this could be easier. And if you're sitting here as part of managerial team in higher education, and if you can hear this, we beg you, please, this is really, if we individually longing for community contribution, we need your help, and without your help we can't make that exchange, and we won't have the data that could actually make changes in the policy. So we need you, and you also need the money we bring in the projects in the university. So how about we all try to work in making the process smoother, and our community representatives can be recognized and can be paid, and their effort and time are valued, and a faster payment process, easier finances infrastructure to set them up, and I just need that, I think.
So we wanted to open it up to questions to the audience. I don't know if anybody had a question they'd like to put to this wonderful panel. Yeah, one hand.
Yeah. We've heard a lot about institutional inertia and how that is really frustrating. So Arturo Escobar wrote a book, Designs for the Pluriverse, and he said there are 4 colonizing institutions: governments, corporations, universities, and the church, or religion. So actually, I work for a university as well. Does that mean that the work we're all talking about happens more readily outside of those 4 institutions?
Yes.
I can speak to that.
So why are we working for institutions?
So the form of community organising I practice is called broad-based community organising, and it's really rooted in the fact that if you go down a road, there will be those institutions. You'll walk past a school, you'll walk past a church, a faith group, you might walk past a university, and they're there. And when society fails, or like when people fall through the gaps, more often or not, they will encounter them. You know, be it like one of the priests I worked with, he gets homeless people knocking on his door regularly, like saying, "Oh, it's really cold. I don't have any money to heat my home," for example. And so they really encounter like what happens when society goes wrong or when our government fails them. And I guess for us, I mean, like within academia, there's like the quadruple helix of like innovation, like thinking about the different parts of society that often need to work together or challenge each other in order for change to happen. And so I agree that institutions are often imperfect and frustrating. I can speak about that about my institution. It's not perfect. Also UAL a little bit. There's times when the UAL has frustrated me a little bit, especially when it comes to paying invoices and what have you. But
or you're a refugee.
yeah. But like, if you take the assumption that if you need change, you need power, those organizations do have power. They have budgets, they have people who care. And with our understanding, if you get those organizations to work together, as imperfect as they may be, you can win a real living wage. The real living wage came because like organizations in East London came together and said, like, we've had enough about this. Let's challenge the local hospital. Let's challenge HHBC. And now the living wage is a real thing. It's impacted government policy. And so I agree with you. It's tempting to like, let's burn the system down and let's start again. But I would argue that our institutions, as imperfect as they may be, they are a good place for us as ordinary people to start. Or you could do the Elon Musk version of it, have a few $1 billion and make change that way. But for those who are in poverty, like me, I argue, like, organize. Find the people in your organization. Find the organizations near you. They are there, waiting to work with people.
Could I add to that?
Yeah, please, yeah.
I think the change we are asking is not so big. We are just asking some infrastructural, procedural arrangement. And I don't think that needs the whole burning of a building. It just needs a caring individual or a committee to decide on visibly seeing the needs and acting up and enabling the process to take place. That's all. It doesn't even need new member of staff. It's not cost effective as far as my understanding stands. So it's just enabling the process, really. I think sometimes we feel we are ages behind, and I don't think it should be the case. And I think what we are asking for is in comparison to everything that can change in an institution, this is a very minor request and
reasonable.
Reasonable, please.
The issue that is such a simple request and it's not done, what it transpires is that it's not the will. So, because it's super simple what we're asking. And what evidence is that there are a conflict of values or a conflict of discourses towards values, and it's because how punctual are they to charge students? If they will work with the same efficacy to pay people back, you know. So while the universities work as a corporation, there is a conflict of interest. And bureaucracy is just a machinery to hide that.
I would argue it's the fact we're in the bureaucracy that's really the problem. That's the issue, the bureaucratization of absolutely everything, enabled by the digital revolution. Perhaps that's the big problem, and it's dehumanizing, and it's killing social capital and the networks that you talked about.
I mean, I personally would agree with that. I think that where things go wrong, where people are treated like with a lack of dignity and care, is because like we've built a culture of bureaucracy where making sure everything works in the same way and treats everyone the same has become the objective. And I think for us, and the way that we see the world, is that real antidote towards that is relationships. Like, do you know your colleagues in a way? Do you know your neighbours? You know, you don't tell your mum, can you fill this form out before I get you your next birthday present, right? You know, we don't treat that task with such bureaucracy.
Probably an app for that.
maybe. But I guess that's the big challenge. Like, do we have relationships to affect the change we want?
Any other questions? Yeah, Carole?
Yeah, it's obvious, isn't it? I'm really interested in this what you've been talking about in terms of dignity and agency and action. And I think all of you talked about how you wanted to empower the individuals that you work with, and one of the things that came across was this not being able to get employment, not being able to have jobs and all of that. And I think it might have been you, Ben, talked about you're looking at ways into employment, but working with employers, and then you stopped. You didn't say anything more. So I wondered if you could.
Yeah, no.
Say a
So
bit
I
more,
think
because action to me.
that's exactly. It's something that's to be actioned in a lot of ways. So I started with Waltham Forest back in September last year, and the main aim has been focused on supporting people with accessing education. We've taken on a lot more now, which is around trying to work with businesses to make sure that there are streamlined processes for people to access work. And I think, so for example, it's around networking, because there are a number of organizations who are doing amazing work. So there's Tent Partnership for Refugees, who are doing amazing work in terms of particularly focusing on employment for refugees. And so they run sort of job fairs in partnerships with local councils. That's something that we really want, because they work with up to 70 organizations who are obviously taking on a lot of refugees in terms of their work, but it's a streamlined process, so it's a lot easier. You just sort of, you just click on a QR code and you get instant training, for example. So there are ways that you can make these things accessible, and I think what's really unfortunate at the moment is, I think also going back to this idea of like different teams, like within a council, for example, it's a bit of a behemoth, because it's so behemoth, should I say, because it's so difficult to know what other people are doing, but also to make sure that awareness and that knowledge is there. Say, for example, within the employment and business team, that refugees are allowed to work, but also what kind of professions we're looking to sort of get them into and how we can support them with that. So I think there's a lot around trying to sort of build those networks with businesses. You know, there's some businesses or companies who are already sort of businesses of sanctuary. So Greg's in Newcastle, for example, are a sort of a company of sanctuary because they employ refugees on a regular basis. They offer training, all of those kind of things. So I think the more we can really sort of push this idea of sanctuary is really important, because it means that people are really thinking about what they're doing, how they're making their work much more accessible. So I think it's a very important thing in terms of pushing that forward quite a lot, as much as we can on a local level.
Fantastic. I think that brings us to time. I've seen some signs up. Yeah, so thank you everyone so much for coming and for your questions. I think that wraps us up, and I'll pass over to Francesco.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've been taking a whole notebook of notes, but I just will say a few words that resonated with me, if it makes sense to try to bring it to a close, and then we have some more time for drinks. I mean, I liked how we really expanded the role of the designer, of an artist as well. Alisa talked us through the role of the facilitator, but also we're talking about being an activist, or even I like you, Azadeh, talking about making the problem visible. And of course, the notion of the safe space where we started, and then I've seen this journey going towards the brave spaces, which definitely we need to embrace more. And as well, it's interesting, the shift between places, well, spaces and places as well, because also, for instance, you will see in the map, often some spaces become places if it become meaningful to us, and especially for an asylum seeker who is trying to resettle in a new place, you're trying to a certain extent, create a sense of belonging or social integration. But then as well, also this project was in the context of East London, where there's lots of regeneration or gentrification policies, and as well that pushes people out even more. So a very complicated context in which to create meaningful places. And then, of course, we talked about mobility, isolation, and the importance of social cohesion, but also art as a real, it's very powerful in terms, it has a very therapeutic role. And as well, even in our project, in the second part, we also had some budget for counseling, but actually some participants didn't want any talking therapy because they actually don't want to talk about their trauma. But then in the making, you, as also Alisa was saying, you don't engage, you don't look at the other person in the eyes, but through the making, you then open up and talk about other things, and that's very healing. But as curators of these spaces, we need to allow the skills for both the production, as Tabitha was talking, as well as all these soft skills that are involved into these healing process. Of course, as well, we need to acknowledge that this project, I often use an activist approach, was done through within a higher education institution. So I share your frustration for these infrastructures that are often, they should have processes that should be enabling this social work with a social purpose, but often we need to challenge those barriers, and as well the inner work you need to do as an activist to really navigate these complex systems and facilitate system change. Some people were talking about creating change from the outside of the system, but I think there is also a role in creating change from within the system, and we have a role to play also to change our organizations and also work with other organizations and the communities outside to create change. So I liked also this journey of power that was very present, especially in Froi's talk. We started this journey from the sense of feeling of power over and feeling powerless, whereas then the participants really embraced power within themselves and the self-confidence they brought, and the power to create change in their community, and then the collective power with people. And as Froi was saying, just if we work together, we can have the power with others to make change. And as well, I totally agree with you, Azadeh, to make the richness of as academics, we can hold the complexity and the richness of this, but then, and of course, we are often very much embedded in the community, and we can collect these lived experiences that possibly policymakers don't. But then, of course, we need to make our work accessible, and of course, we need to shift from policy recommendations and from words towards actions and collective actions of care. I totally agree with the dehumanization and the bureaucracy as dehumanizing stories. And in fact, that's a bit of the work we've been doing also with Lucy Horta, with the Lifeline. That's about really making all these stories, making visible what and also tangible what being vulnerable means and feels and looks like, and as well what it feels to be human, like also Seher says in the film. And then finally, I think in a way, I think this all discussion resonates to me in also expanding the role of fashion within this. Fashion, as we started, is a storytelling tool, as also Ben was saying, is a space to find yourself. We have one of the participants who says, I'm here to find myself, I'm here to find myself through this project, and also the shifting narratives. And as well, I hope you will have the time walking out to see the garments and all the artworks created, which really, I think, embody this duality, as Zeej was talking, the uncertainty, but as well the anxiety of not knowing what will happen with your life, but also the sense of hope and agency that you build for yourself. And also so that you can shift from an obsession for economic benefit, but also considering the economic and the cultural value of this work. And finally as well, I hope that you can also join our call for action, sign the petition, join us in this movement. This project is coming to an end, where we're applying for follow-on funding and we want to collaborate with you. And hopefully so that we can all support this, this work, and you can join us on this journey on fashion as a vehicle for social change. And to really finish, because I know I've been talking also on behalf of so many people, we tried also to I'm sorry that Katherine, also another participant, couldn't be here, but I want to bring the voices, the collective voice. This is one of the manifestos that was written together by one of the groups in Newham. And this manifesto is called Breaking Barriers. We say, we are responsible for our own happiness. We feel stronger when we run the world together. We know we matter. We believe in the power of love to create equality. We have the perseverance to create peace. We do our best to break all barriers. We hope for safety and to achieve our dreams. Together, we will create beautiful change. Thank you ever so much.